I've dreamt of this. This place of fear and fury. Do you hear it? The heartbeat of the lost ones. I can feel them on my skin. Each death, inked in blood. I won't stop fighting for them. Until the very last beat fades away. You want the truth? All the lives inside me tell me to let go. The shadow will always hang over me. What will I become?
David, this feels very long time coming for me. I've wanted to do this for a while, especially because you're one of the few. I don't think we've ever met in person,
No.
which is a crime. I'm such a fan, and
Oh, wow.
it's
I'm such a fan of you, Austin.
well, that's very kind, but no, for real, man. It feels actually quite strange to have never, whether it's a GDC or
Mhm.
some other kind of thing like that, to have never crossed paths. But every now and again, I have one of these Game Maker notebooks where this becomes the
Yeah,
introduction in a way.
yeah, the window. Yeah.
Exactly, but it's not bad. How are you? You're in London, yes?
I'm in Cambridge, very close to London.
Okay,
1
right.
hour. Beautiful city. Very nice.
And how is
Appropriate size. No, it's not very big, calm. It's good for making music.
yeah, that's not a bad thought, because Los Angeles sometimes is not quite so calm and
Yeah, I know.
uh,
I heard about the traffic and all that. Wow.
yeah, and just the ambient
Yeah.
noise. I have a friend that lives on the way outskirts of LA,
Mhm.
and it feels like living in the countryside. It's almost like farmland,
Mhm.
and it does awaken those very romantic, like I remember visiting Lake Lucerne in Switzerland, and they said, "Oh yes, Rachmaninoff would come here and compose in a cabin by the lake," and it awakens those
Yeah,
images and
of
thoughts.
course he will go there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm only today. I only want to talk about Scriabin, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I got really intrigued by your comment, and I read a bit about him. I'm fascinated by his music.
Are you relatively new to it? Like, was
Yes,
it one of those that you just kind of indulged
yes,
in?
yes. So I listened to a etude of piano that is just the way he writes the left hand is very orchestral and
Right.
very powerful, very passionate. But at the same time, I find the melodies incredibly beautiful, while a bit
Mm,
weird.
yeah.
They are not straightforward.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I
So
think his music seems to mirror everything I understood of his personality.
mhm,
Sometimes composers are very strangely different from their music.
Mhm.
You know, like um, obviously you have the most cliche example of all time would be Beethoven, who, by all accounts, was exactly in person as his writing, right?
Yes,
But
absolutely.
then, like, I remember Ennio Morricone, to give a
Uh-huh.
very different example,
Uh-huh.
seemingly maybe it's because he was only open with people he was super comfortable with, and
Mhm.
most people wouldn't qualify.
Mhm.
But he always came across like he just had no personality. Like he just, I remember once a friend of mine met him and said he felt like he was meeting an accountant, you know, somebody who was curious about accuracy and numbers, and but didn't exhibit, you know, wild passion. But then you listen to his music and you think, how is that
Exactly.
the same guy? You know, he
Exactly.
was such a daring and imaginative composer.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it is funny. But Scriabin, I remember reading about him back in the day and was like, this guy's nuts.
It
He
is.
seemed, but it must have been a hell of a pianist. Um,
Yes, I think so. To play what he wrote, you need to be head of a pianist.
how well does it fit? Because I didn't. Is that your must be your main instrument if you're able to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
read through Scriabin?
yeah, yeah. Now I'm very busy. Piano, any instrument requires a lot of. It's like an exercise in a way. It has the muscular part of it.
Of
Like
course,
you need to. It's like athletic. You need to keep the reflexes,
100%.
and that part is I'm losing it a bit. But I try to learn, and even if it's slow, of course I don't respect the tempo that was supposed, but you try to bring the motion, the technique at the slow. And
Mm.
someday I have plenty of time. I wish. Someone said it. I read it recently. Like for music, you need 300 years or something like that. I don't know who said that.
There's the yeah, in this there's this new John Williams documentary that just came out within the last week,
Yeah,
where he ends with this quote that he said, "Music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music."
there you go. It's
And
super beautifully put.
and
Yeah,
painfully true.
yeah.
I remember he. There's another thing that he has said in interviews multiple times, where someone asked him once, um, you know, what excites you? What music do you hear these days that is interesting to you?
Mm,
He said, you know, I don't. He said, I actually don't listen to much new music, but every now and again, he said, I'll hear something like from a young jazz musician or
hmm.
something, and it makes me wonder what it will be like 50 years from now. And I just only wish I could be around to
Yes,
hear what that will be like.
yes,
So it's a poignant thought coming from a guy in his 90s,
yes,
sort of fantasizing about what the world will be when he's 140.
yes.
But
He's so incredible.
oh
Wow,
yeah, I could not recommend the documentary more highly. It's so uplifting. It's one of those that makes
wow.
you just want to celebrate life.
Yeah,
It's on Disney Plus, and I assume
there is this energy about. I remember there's a Cuban pianist called Bebo Valdez. He was very famous. He was quite tall. I met him. He was 87, and he felt so fragile. It's
mm,
very fragile. And then he sit on the piano, and it was like a transformation. He was a
fire.
beast. It's fire. And then
Yeah,
it ended and go back to that. Okay, I'm done.
I
Music
have
is
a
that thing. Yeah.
I have a friend who is Cuban, and his grandmother fled communism
Hmm.
70 years ago, something like that, as a young girl, but as like maybe she was like 19 or something. I mean,
Hmm.
actually, maybe I think she might have been a little older because um, there was very much her dream was to be a singer, and
Hmm.
she essentially had to abandon her dream
Hmm.
to escape. And so, like so many Cubans, they end up in Florida, and so here we are, 60 however many plus years later, and she's got a grandson who's a composer colleague of mine and a friend, and he takes it upon himself to make it his mission to fulfill her dream of being a singer.
Wow.
Now she's like 99,
Oh wow.
and so she had written all these songs, and he decided to produce them as a record, as a grandson grandmother bonding project,
Wow.
and they booked a theater. There's a theater in Los Angeles, the Ricardo Montalban Theater,
Hmm.
and it was like I went to it. It felt like every Cuban in Los Angeles was there, and the energy in the room was so unbelievably excited. and she's 99. She at the time she I think was 97 or something like that. Now I
Mhm.
think she's 99 or 100,
Wow.
and she starts the thing to your pianist story. She comes out on stage with this cane, and she's walking super slow, and it's like the microphone. There's a whole band there, and just like limping,
Yeah.
and then she just throws the cane and runs and grabs the mic, and it was like someone 60 years younger than her. I mean, I know people in their 40s that can't move like this woman, and then she put on this crazy show. She ended up winning
Wow.
the Latin Grammy for Best New Artist.
Oh, wow.
Is by far the oldest person to ever do that. It's her name is Angela Alvarez, and the album is great too. By the way, his
Mhm.
production, these are like very Cuban songs,
Yeah.
and holy crap, it's so beautiful. It was one of my favorite things of all time. But yeah,
Oh,
that
wow.
she she played on the assumption of your story, like someone who's very weak, and
Yeah. There is
but
a
let's
great
talk about
display.
you.
Ah,
That's so okay. You clearly it must have begun on piano. What is your what was your sort of childhood entry point? Because I remember seeing you write on Twitter and things from time to time that
mhm,
you clearly have a pretty deep classical
mhm,
um, training and
mhm.
appreciation and things like that. So that usually begins in childhood. Why don't we start there?
So I I don't remember this, but this is what my mom told me, so it may be not accurate. So there was this little Casio, old Casio with four sounds: fantasy, flute, what electric piano, whatever. And I was remember listening to 18, MacGyver, whatever, and just bringing all these melodies and that thing. And my mom thought, okay, he's good at
You
this.
were one finger doing bum ba dum bum bum
Dun, dun,
bum bum.
dun.
That's funny.
And so she wanted me to go to piano, but my father didn't because it was a very old school. My city was a very old school, so music. What kind of job is that? What kind of
Yeah, right.
future is that? So my
It's a
mom,
parent who doesn't want their children to struggle, I think. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So my mom uh, drove a piano on the table, and he's like, "Okay, you practice here." And I started practicing on the table until at some point I went to classes, and
Oh, wow.
it was just incredible. And it's like I
Which
know
city which city did you grow up in?
it's called Vigo. It's in the northwest of Spain. It's quite
Okay.
an it's industrial. It has a very famous car factory and that,
Mm.
and it has some culture. But Spain came out of a dictatorship at that just not long ago, so we were rebuilding our brains as well, not just the economy or whatever. So yeah, and so I started going to the conservatory with a very strange teacher that didn't allow me to remove the elbows from my. It was super weird. So I learned this is comes from a reason. I learned in the wrong way, muscular, and muscle memory is very hard to rewire,
Yeah, no kidding.
right? So
What is the basis of meaning you couldn't move your elbows out?
yeah, and it's impossible to play piano like this.
Well,
It's
what do
a
you do with when like the range
you cannot
becomes
do it. So I was super frustrated. So that lasted not long, and I say this is this
right?
six
Yeah.
year old 6 year old kid saying I cannot play. I don't know how to play. And then I went to
Never
a
heard of that.
yeah, super strange. In piano, there are a lot of weird, strange
Yeah,
techniques.
music teachers in general. Same with 90% of composition teachers are just frustrated and
Yeah.
terrible, and yeah, it's the same.
And then I went to a proper place and I started getting into this passion that grew with my life. Like it's music is it if it gets you and you understand or you feel it, you don't need to understand music to feel it. This is the good way with music. Uh, and at the same time, my uncle is into technology a lot. So since I was a kid, I was learning piano, but he had this room full of synthesizers.
Mm.
And this is just like it was a dream. All these lights and things that you can touch.
Was it a hobby for him, or did he do it professionally?
He was a philosophy teacher, and he did
Oh,
it as a hobby.
wow. I
And
guess synths are
yeah,
since the dawn of time. There's no
exactly.
like lightweight hobby. Yeah.
And I learned a lot. And then he had a computer with the old logic, whatever was logic like 20 or 40 years ago, 40 years ago, more than, I think it was called
Logic One.
Finale or logic. Yeah. So I learned all that. And it got in the back of my head while I was progressing with music. Then I met my maestro, like the person that really taught me piano, which was Cuban. They
Mm,
had very good schools there of music, and I just studied like an absolute mad person. Like piano, I was obsessed with it. I spent my days there, blah, blah, blah. Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. I remember the first time I listened to classical music. I think it
mm.
was the fifth of Beethoven, and I just couldn't stop listening to the thing. He was super strong. You're a 11-year-old kid and put that thing, and it's like ding, and it's whoa, 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 whoa. What is this?
Yeah,
The
no kidding.
architecture, such a small thing going. Wow, it's super powerful.
Have you ever watched um, the Leonard Bernstein young person's concerts, where it was like a TV, a public broadcast, live television thing he did starting in the 50s. I think he did it. I think he did something like 55 concerts over about a 10-year period,
Oh wow.
where they were on live television Saturday mornings, where he would go to Carnegie Hall or Lincoln Center, and they would fill the hall with children, and he
Wow.
would do these concerts, the young people's concerts, but they were also broadcast live, and they weren't just a concert; it was like a music class.
Yes.
And so he would, like the very very first one is he would ask these provocative questions that are not talking down to children at all. It was truly astounding. The first one was, "What does music mean?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very
Mm-hmm.
interesting question. Imagine asking that to a 10-year-old. But the hall is full of these kids, and he comes out and he plays the William Tell Overture with the New York Philharmonic.
Mm-hmm.
He plays just the first 20 seconds, and then he stops. And he says, "Okay, what is this?" And everyone in the audience, because at the time on TV would have been the Lone Ranger, which that was the theme,
Ah, yeah, yeah,
So all the
exactly.
kids start screaming, "Hi ho, Silver!" And he says, "Well, I hate to break it to you, but this was composed by a Italian named Rossini, who never heard of a cowboy." And he then proceeds to kind of unpack it. And the thing that's so great about these, just to your Beethoven point, is the camera is always cut back to the reactions of these kids, and they're just
Mm,
like totally blown away and
yes,
and full of wonder. And it's one of those funny things where you go, when you frame it the right way,
yes,
this stuff is not so many parents treat exposing classical music to kids kind of like eating their vegetables, where they go, "Look, the kids aren't going to like it, but I think it's good for them. We should make them do it." And
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I think
I think it's
it's
totally the opposite.
if it's done the right way, if it's not presented as this thing we,
Yeah,
should do because we must,
yeah,
it's exciting. It's
yeah.
yeah, you were.
In my school, I remember they were pretty. Our music class in the school, which normally in the schools music classes are not very good, but
Mhm.
I've been lucky. Had this teacher that he just put instruments and recordings on a massive floor, and then we can choose what we want to do each
Mm.
class. So you grab and I remember one class that he brought uh, a quartet or a quintet, I don't remember, and to play the forest, how do you say in English, forestations of Vivaldi.
Oh,
That's,
the Four Seasons.
yeah, Four Seasons. Sorry, Four Seasons,
Yeah,
forestations. Mamma mia.
yeah, yeah. No, no, I got you.
And he was listening. That is the second thing that he goes. How powerful is this when you listen to an instrument live
Oh yeah.
and you feel the physicality, the vibrations, the connection, and then I want to do this forever.
So you were, how you said, like 11 or something?
At that point, I was 11, 12, and I wanted to do that. But from wanting to do it to actually learn how to do it, oof, there is a massive difference.
For sure.
And it's a journey of a lot of struggle.
Does that, so then you, I assume, university or conservatory or something like
Mhm.
that then became the next,
Correct.
big step.
Correct.
Was piano the focus, or did you immediately, when did composing and that whole aspect start to become part of it?
So I wanted to be pianist. But then I started improvising on the piano, and that part started, that curiosity about colors and harmony and textures start growing on me. I never learned properly composition, never. I went to
Wow.
classes of composition, what they call the fundaments of composition. It's 4
Right.
years. And in the first class, I remember they put this recording and say, okay, tell me how many instruments are here. And we were all like, okay, there is a harp, there is a violin there. I think there is this. And at the end, it's similar to an example you did before. It's just a piano. And I was like, what? This is impossible. There are percussion. And it was prepared piano. And it's like, okay, this is interesting.
This is a good trick.
Yeah. So I learned a bit about counterpoint. I don't remember very well, but I understand it and I can see the structure. I learn a bit about orchestration, learn a bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
How you write a romantic piece and what are the elements of or impressionism, Debussy, but never very deep. But I think it's a good starting point. And
I mean, 4 years, it sounds like, probably
yeah,
quite a bit.
yeah, and and at the same time, I there is this thing it was not video games really. It's called demo scene, which is
Yeah. Trackers and all that.
yeah, and that was a clash, classical and demo scene, and it's like okay, I met these friends and I started doing that real time geometry, art, code, and music.
Was
And
that a big thing in Spain at the time? Was a big scene for that?
there was a tiny but strong, very
I see.
passionate, like
Got it.
we were very close, like we are the rebellion, like we want to do this. This is different. No one does this, and it was cool. It was refreshing. It was spectacular. There were no rules. Like we were almost
Yeah. Oh,
creating
yeah.
that path, and we did a couple of them. And after I got a scholarship somewhere to do whatever I wanted for a year, which was amazing. I just did music, and after
Wow.
I just started doing video games. But for what I thought, and this from what I thought, making a video game is making music or sound for a video game to what it really is.
Mm.
It's so complicated. So
Yeah.
my first project
Especially
is
the way you do it.
yeah, it's just insane, but it's so fun and it's so. Then I started 23. I always keep playing piano, learning piano. I think it's part of me at this point. I love technology. I love music and combining both. I love sound as well. I became a mix of a composer, sound designer.
Oh, I was going to ask about that too. That's definitely on my list here.
Yeah,
My mental.
yeah,
I don't actually plan these things. I just follow my instincts.
yeah.
But I remember at one point taking note of the fact that you're obviously your title is as an audio director,
Hmm.
and most audio directors that I've worked with and that I know tend to come from sound design.
Hmm.
There are occasional, of course, exceptions of musician or composers who transitioned over, but it seems like the technical requirements of being an audio director tend to
Hmm.
be more natural for sound designers as a statistical
Yes,
analysis of the industry, it would seem.
yes.
Um, and but particularly, it was striking that based on things like you uploading yourself futzing around with Scriabin, it's not just that you're a musician. That's pretty deep, and that's not entry level
No,
repertoire to just kind of play around with,
yeah.
which meant that you really had a deep hold on the musical side. I meant to ask, how did that? I'm kind of getting ahead because I want to hear how you
Hmm.
acquired those skills gradually, but it is striking that someone in your position would have that level of musicianship and musicality and musical
Mm,
kind of richness in your
mm,
background and in your interests,
mm,
while functioning in a capacity that also requires this whole other dimension
mm.
outside of that. But well, let's get to that because okay, you kind of just stated matter of factly like, oh, yeah, and then I started working in games. But what does that mean? I mean, that doesn't just happen randomly.
No.
It's seemingly. So what was the first job and how did it come into your world?
So after a few of these demo scenes that I quite enjoy, I think I wanted to go deeper on this. And then I applied to a company where my friend was there. They were doing a project that was very simple. And so they say, yeah, come do some test with music. But we want music, slices of music that you can put in any order. And it's like, what?
Mm,
And it needs to sound good. And that was interesting. Well, this is quite a challenge. And then you
yeah.
need to write the scripts. So that works. And you're okay. I had no idea, like literally no idea. So I think the fact that I was thrown into the a jungle that was new for me, I need to learn all this new ecosystem, all these new. There were no tools. Right now, we have engines like Wise, Unreal, Fmod, Unity, whatever. Back in the day, there was mostly nothing. Even
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
for audio, it's like, yeah, I want to play a sound when and where I want to play it, and you need to uh, type the coordinates and all that thing. It was just, this is super complicated and clunky. So I think the knowledge of music plus survival mode, like I think at some point in my life, it it came against me a bit in the sense like I was a very one man band for a long time,
Sure.
because in Spain video games at some point was not very big. We were 100 people in the whole of the country maybe or whatever.
Right.
So you need to solve all the problems yourself. And for example, I think a good example would be in composition. What it meant for me is like I always play myself or think the technology that can help me. And I, until very recently, I didn't, and it's such a silly thing. I didn't swap my brain to think I can call a cellist. Let's work with this choir. It was so ingrained on me, like I need to do it because there is no resources and there is. So maybe that it played in the I need to get very technical. I need
Mm.
to understand how it works. But at the same time, I I got a bit too close in that. So now I'm trying to revert it a bit and start
It's
because exactly.
It's a very interesting dichotomy. I've never really thought of it like that. That the sort of self-sufficiency, the,
Hmm.
the 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 drive to really understand the technology as a almost unintended side effect of the need for self-sufficiency. I've never
Hmm.
quite seen it that way, but that makes total sense. That I mean, in a way, I guess I've thought of it that way, where I always tell young composers that are just getting started,
Hmm.
you should the more you can do yourself, the more that you'll be able to deliver projects that don't have any budget and stuff, because that's what one typically does at the
Yes.
start of their career. And if you can mix it and it sounds good and implement it and all those things,
Yes.
all it's just going to be all the better, and it's going to come off better, and it kind of helps it punch above its weight, as it were.
Yes.
um, so okay, so that what year about are we talking that this was
20,
happening?
the 23 to 26.
What year,
Ah,
like calendar year?
calendar year will be 20 years ago, like 2000.
Yeah, okay, yeah, got it. It's always interesting to hear
Yeah.
about the kinds of tools that people felt they did and did not have relative to kind of the
Yeah.
wider view.
Yeah.
I definitely, I'm very grateful. I entered into the industry only a couple years after that, like 2005, and
Yeah.
there were already certain basic tools
Yes.
that they were pretty crappy by today's standards, but there wasn't nothing.
Yes.
It's a big difference.
Yes. After that, I worked on the first Unreal project,
You're
and
right.
there was something. There was visual scripting, like, oh, I can see this, and I can see that, and I can do this. And then I
Yeah.
think, yeah, things are starting to happen, and they were happening very fast.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So, obviously this became a immediate love. I assume that you were feeling very at home
Hmm.
working in this space. Did you ever have ambitions as a composer separate from, like, did you think, "Oh, I also wanna
Mm,
write a ballet, or I wanna go do a film score," or that sort of thing?
mhm.
What is your kind of broader compositional ambition?
So I would have loved to do. Actually, I did some small films and documentaries, and I love it. But at the same time, I needed somehow to choose.
Mm,
I need. because
Is
also
that a self-imposed?
I think at some point I'm not very good with the business side of things, but I understand this is kind of a path, and I
Mm,
cannot do. You cannot cook well everything, right? If you are a chef, you cannot do sushi and this and this and this and this and this and that. So I prefer to stick to something that I know I can be stronger. It's just a decision.
mm.
And but yeah, I would have loved to write for film or do write for piano. I do for myself, but I think it's so beautiful to write just a book of preludes or something like that.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
I actually was at I actually was at Game Sound Con,
Hmm.
a week ago or whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. And Brian Schmidt, who I'm sure you know, he reached out and said, "I have a student who I'm trying to match him with somebody just to have a coffee to kind of. He's new. I think he's still finishing his degree or just finished. Would you be willing to have coffee with him and answer some questions about the industry?" And I do that most every year, something along those lines. Sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's actually
Hmm.
part of the gang scholars thing.
Hmm.
Um, and to your point, this kid, he did something I've never had someone do. It was honestly really classy. Piano and being a pianist is similarly very core to
Hmm.
his idea of music, and so he loves writing, like these romantic kind of delicate piano pieces, and um, and so he showed up to the meeting, and he had published a book of like, it's like 24 preludes kind of a thing. I can't remember the name, but it's something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah,
And he had it as a gift, to give preemptively. He's like, if you ever, you
yeah,
know, want to play through this, hopefully there's something you might enjoy. And it was the first time anyone had ever, you always get like their demo CD or
yeah, yeah,
their like a nowadays it's like a QR code of
yeah, yeah.
a real crafter link or something. And there was something about giving a physical book of
That's so
piano
beautiful.
solos that it really, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna ever forget this.
It's so beautiful.
It's a very classy,
Yeah,
cool gesture. So yeah, and it honestly made me think I should sit at the piano and I should sit and play through these, and I should also this would be a fun exercise to just sort of write some things like this. Haven't in ages, that sort of. So
yeah,
you're preaching to the choir, in other words,
yeah.
and that's yeah, I support that. Also, do you still feel what 20 years ago you told yourself that you have to in some way choose? Does it seem like that's still the case, or do you?
No, I should have. No, I think you. If you choose music, you can. It's a language. If you know how to speak that language, and you have an identity, I think that is the part that is more interesting. You have a way of speaking that language with your own accent. Then you can apply to different things. It's no.
I tend to agree, but some people become very they're so passionate about a specific thing, like a
Yeah,
composer like Olivier Driviere is largely not interested in anything but games, for example,
yeah,
because it's not really pursuing those because the the intersection of the
yeah,
musical and the technical is so all
yeah,
consuming. I honestly feel a little bit similarly, even though I do little bits outside of it. But yeah, to me, that's why I'm always curious, because
yeah.
some people are living in their happy place, but then other people, it's just one city along the road that they
Mm,
happen to be in right now.
I think different medias give you different freedom and different possibilities. So I think restricting. I'm more going the other way. I should allow myself to
Mhm.
do a concert or because
Oh, please.
it gives you different options to communicate, right? You have something to say, whatever it is.
Well, yes, I support this. I want to see I want to see an album of your piano music, and then I would love to come see that live. So yeah, consider one ticket sold, and we'll go from there. Um,
Yeah.
so okay, so then obviously you're getting started in games. You're learning the technology. This is all
Mhm.
still happening in Spain. So then walk me through, um, you know, what happened next, basically.
So I do a couple more games in Spain. Uh, Deadlight, it was a side scroller where I learned a bit more Unreal. So I keep learning. Uh, I keep playing with music and how to make music more dynamic, more interesting in the game, more connected. Learn a lot about sound design. I was a pretty bad sound designer back there. I did not had no idea how you create a sound. I knew how to create music. I was with sound design. I was good on the high level, on the vision of it, like creatively, like how tactile it should be, the textures. But I didn't know how to make it
Yeah.
and how to sound good. It just sounds harsh and crap, and it has no transient and it has nothing. It's just so it was a bit of a frustration, but it's a challenge. So okay, let's just keep going until it gets better, and it just gets better the more you do it. So it's a simple process, really.
Hmm.
It just takes time. So I did another game, and then I did a game that I think you listened to some music of it in a concert not long ago.
Rime.
Austin Rime. So I did Rime, and half in the development process, I came to the UK. So I did Hellblade One and Rime at the same time, and
Oh wow, I didn't
yeah,
realize. In my mind, Rime was significantly earlier than that, but I couldn't really remember the timeline.
yeah, it was. They were maybe Rime finished 6 months earlier, and then Hellblade. It was quite hectic and quite hard, but I think working so hard at the moment it just opened a lot of possibilities in myself and two completely different uh, universes. Hellblade,
Yeah.
dark, psychological, strange, pushing a lot of the sound design side. Rhyme, much more bright, ethereal, much more musical, simple. There was an elegance and a simplicity about that music,
Mhm.
and Hellblade was more. It was completely different. So it was very cool to explore things that they are not easy, like going out of your comfort zone. Rhyme is my comfort zone. It's very
Mm.
easy for me. I sit on the piano, I improvise that more or less, and the melodies and that kind of music. Hellblade is not easy at all for me. That is really hard. Really different music, really different textures, really different everything. So it was a very good process.
That's so interesting. I would never have guessed, and that's part of. It's funny how well I have a lot of thoughts. First off, with regard to Rhyme, the concert, for the sake of our listeners, is last earlier this year in
Mhm,
2024 in Barcelona. I was asked to conduct some bits and pieces of a concert. Mostly just did my music and some of Bobby Slavov Baldur's Gate 3 music,
mhm.
and but also on the program was Rhyme, and there was this wonderful young woman who had been a sound designer. I'm suddenly blanking on her name.
It's Mireia.
Yes, Mirela.
Yeah.
She sang, and I hope if she ever hears this, she doesn't mind my saying so. But backstage before she went out, she was so nervous because she says, "I'm not a singer." She says, He asked me to sing this just because I was like the nearby person who kind of could sing a little or something like that." She made it sound like it was very, sort of. It's not like you searched far and wide for the greatest singer in the planet. You knew someone who could do it or something.
But
And
what
she
it was a decision. Like I think she has something in her fragility and in his nervousness that was
Well, I can
support
tell
her.
you, I agree with that because she kept speaking like, "I'm not a professional. I don't do this. I'm a sound designer." And then she went out on stage, and holy crap, man! Everyone in that theater was a different person. I mean, it was so special, and it was. Yeah, I was so happy for her that she
Really.
got to feel a
Yeah,
thousand people clapping and screaming,
so
and
good. So
because she just kept, she was very insistent. This is not what I do, because I didn't know her. I show up, I see there's a few different singers. There's Julie Elvin's there, and there's a few others, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, she's a singer. It was in my ignorance that I didn't know her. And I had listened to Rhyme, but I hadn't in ages, and I didn't remember the specifics.
mhm.
And then it was like she opened her mouth, and it just was so beautiful, and it was so interesting. To your point, it's funny how we always fall into this trap where if you do a project,
Mhm.
and no matter if it's way outside your comfort zone, if it goes well,
Mhm.
everyone just assumes that's your thing.
Yes.
You're that guy.
Yes.
And as much as I also, as a composer, am constantly trying to outmaneuver that problem, I must confess I was guilty because, I knew, of course, Hellblade, which, we'll get to Hellblade in a second here, but that was to me just it was such a transformative experience, truly one of the most visceral gaming experiences I ever had. And I admired your work so much that I just assumed you were one of those guys who that was their thing. So when I heard Rime, it was like, wow, turns out he can also do that, not even considering that that was actually your home base in a
Yeah.
sense.
I'm more melodic, more melodic.
Yeah, well, and in hindsight, when I think about, I remember at one point you were writing on Twitter about Scarlatti, and it's like
Yeah.
in hindsight, it should have been more obvious to me. And I'm just like, why am I falling for the same freaking trap that I'm always trying to tell people not to, like I remember when my very first game was Flow,
Mhm.
and I came from a classical, I stood in high school in front of the school orchestra and learned to conduct with handwritten sheet music. Flow, this ethereal electronic, that was so outside. I had never tried anything, but everyone just assumed, oh, you're that. I remember once someone wrote on YouTube, Austin is the Brian Eno of video games. And I was like, boy, that is so far from it was anything I would self-identify as. And so anyway, it was a wonderful bit of education in the wider view of you, because it was so beautifully done. But I can't believe that you had to kind of multitask those projects as well on top of it all.
That was super hard. Okay.
How did that work in terms of because the job with Ninja Theory is as a staff in-house position.
Yeah. I'm an employee. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I have a
So
contract. Yeah, exactly.
how did the that seems like that was probably a challenging transition to
Yes, and normally it will not be easily
cloud.
allowed.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like I work for Ninja Theory. I don't work for. Uh,
yeah, exactly.
and you need to ask for permission, and depending if they consider there is competition between
Yeah. Oh,
the,
it's
which is absolutely normal.
yeah.
But I think as I was doing it, and I think whatever they saw on me, they want me to come. They were happy with it, but I was at an energy level of working very hard for Hellblade. It was not an easy project, and I needed to shift so much of my thinking. And then when I was getting home, have dinner, and keep going with the other, it was brutal,
Yeah, I can only imagine.
absolutely brutal.
Yeah, how did that relationship first like what led to this connection with Ninja Theory and taking this job? And it's a pretty big move, leave Spain, all of that.
Yeah,
So
it's a pretty big move, and I miscalculated in a way. I thought it was going to be easier, like because I confounded geographically distance. So they are not so they are not so far away. So culture maybe is not that different. And that was a pretty stupid assumption from my end because they are completely different
I
countries.
mean, even like Madrid to Barcelona is
Exactly. Is exactly that
that's
sometimes
so
we have
funny.
weird thoughts.
Oh, we all do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
exactly. So uh, I had been working since long time ago with a friend that then he moved before Rime. He moved to Ninja, and he told me, "Hey, we're doing this project about this character that has this perspective of how approaches reality." And I was very interested about what could be Hellblade,
Mm.
Senua as a character. Like, oh, whoa, what is this? Yeah. So we are working with these people that and exploring psychosis, but we want to do a very serious approach and a very respectful approach, and I want to do that. And then I apply and I did an interview and it went well. Yeah.
That was going to be one of my questions, because the overall sounds like just the sonic
Mhm.
landscape, the audio direction in the broadest sense, particularly with these voices. I mean, I'm sure you've done 1,000 interviews over the last few years talking
Mhm.
about these ambisonic, I
Mhm.
mean, the binaural,
Mhm.
uh, vocal production. It was so striking, and there's still to this day nothing really. Sometimes games come out and do something so powerful, or movies or whatever, that everyone then copies it, and it sort of becomes a trend. But every now and again, there's also some that are so specific to that project that you can't really copy it. I always think of The Matrix that way. Like that Don Davis score to The Matrix, to me, is one of the greatest film scores ever written. I mean, it was just so original and striking, so much so that you would think everyone would copy it. But the problem is, it's so connected to The Matrix that if you copy it, you're just doing The Matrix. It's not like some generalized gesture that you can put somewhere else, like Thomas Newman with his marimbas ended up in 100 other things. So this, to me, Hellblade was that way as well. And I was going to ask, you kind of hinted at the answer already, but how much of that was you coming in and going, here's what we should do, versus them having a general sense of, what they were trying to do, and it's on you to kind of work out the audio answer to that. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. It makes sense, and it navigates on the second.
Yeah, so they had a fairly clear idea.
They have an idea exactly of why they wanted to achieve. They didn't know how it's going to be integrated and what technology. They heard about binaural. They heard about this, and from there it was a start. I remember going we bought this first version of this binaural mic. It was very simple, and I went down to the street to record things and see how it feels. I was like, all right, this is very interesting. Like, it's really interesting. It has limitations, like it's fixed. You cannot rotate it. But then, to me, binaural in itself is just a technology. So what can I achieve with this that is interesting? And I think it's on how we record the actors, how they move around, how they get close, how we don't cling, the clicks, the mouth noises, if they scream and it's a bit distorted, maybe we don't remove the distortion. It's creating all that physicality to them.
Very raw.
Very raw. Big dynamics. It's not, let's compress, doesn't matter. More of a orchestral recording approach, right? Where you sometimes it's so quiet that I didn't hear that very well. Which is very interesting, because when our brain maybe doesn't understand sounds very well, it tries to predict what they were. So if you hear whispers that are a bit random, but they are in the back of your hearing, and they are in a context, you may think, they were saying this or that. But it's not. So there is some kind of interesting applications of this. And then it's all the psychology, working with the neuroscientists, and how are these voices, how strong they can be, what they can be saying.
Was there a bit of a experiment? Like, my gut tells me, when I played the game, the first one, that it would have been very easy to do too much, because they're so striking, and in a way, even though it's very dark and sort of depressing, it is also sort of addicting, because it's so interesting. Every time these voices come in, and like you say, it's like right behind you, and also whispered 1 millimeter away from you, and it never stops being kind of striking. But it would seem like it's like pouring sauce on, where you taste it and you go, oh, that's nice, and then you just there must have been some sort of like a tuning process to say, okay, how much is too much, when is too little, how do we kind of add dynamic shaping to them coming and going, and how much are they doing these sweeps past our ear, and it must have been a lot of experimenting.
It's a lot of time and a lot of experimenting, and you never really know if you got it right, because you do what you think is right for your vision, but perception of different people, different expectations, but that doesn't matter really, because you cannot do anything about it. But that was my main fear. Is this too much? Is this too much? But then the thing that you can ask is for feedback to people that really have voices, right?
Sure, of course.
And say, hey, how this feels? No, this is not too much. At all, it should be more, and more brutal. And so
I'm impressed that that must have been very nerve-wracking to like someone who struggles with this to play the game. It
Yes,
seems like that could be very painful for them or very
it is.
overwhelming. And so what a daunting,
It
because of
is.
course you want to get it right. So you really kind of need their feedback.
Yes.
But it's like asking, it's like I remember when reading about, Spielberg consulting World War II veterans about Band of Brothers or
Hmm.
Saving Private Ryan, where you
Hmm.
go, you need their input, but also it must be horribly traumatic for them to have to kind of look at this footage and stuff just because, they live this. This is real. This isn't a game. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys honestly pulled it off as well as you. I mean, I know you used just a lot of hard work, being
This.
very careful, I guess, but
Yeah. Yeah. On. I remember in the room we were showing the game to Eddie, which is one of the people with lived experience, and there was this voice that was very deep, very big, and he just went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is this is this is how I hear it. It breaks through the sky, and it's the voice of God, and it's like, Mamma Mia." There is a, I think it's beyond. They work in another logic. That is the actually is a reality that is not shared. So they live in another
mm,
reality, and we tend to apply our logic to everything,
right,
and then
which doesn't work.
it doesn't work. So my work is trying to understand the logic of how things sound and how things, and I think it works. I'm thinking I'm always very critical and questions like you did, is this too much? How can we do this? I've been trying in the second part to apply to the music, working with binaural and voices. We thought the voices is the element that creates that palette instead of being other sources. Almost 90% of sounds in the game come from voices. We
Yeah.
recorded a lot and a lot and a lot of different actors and different singers and metal, heavy metal, and creature people that does strange things, throat singers,
Yeah, well, yeah.
and then you just combine and process everything.
It really felt like the first one, the music is a very crucial but very subtle
Yes,
ingredient.
yes,
It's sort of like the glue that keeps the whole thing from falling apart, but
yes,
you're letting the voices and the all the that there's this tactile kind of disgusting sound design throughout, and all the time that the just kind of those effects that almost look like mirrors
yes,
unshattering, and that
yes,
all the kind of
yes.
type sound. It's really, really kinetic. But I remember having the thought, because when I first played it, I wasn't as familiar with your work or your background, and I remember being impressed when I realized, you come from a music background and
Mhm.
not a sound design background. That in the position of audio director, you had the kind of egoless uh, approach to make music such a delicate part of the overall
Mm.
soundscape. I mean, did you guys ever experiment with having a more forceful or like traditional musical approach, or did it seem obvious from the start to do something like this, a lot more understated?
When I think I tried a lot of things actually, and you put different styles of music from different people just to see how it feels. There is something that is it works or it doesn't, and if it works, why? What element make it work? And then you keep throwing stuff to a video, a visual, something,
Mhm.
and then you start understanding what works. And in Hell, it was less is more in a way, like, but yeah, I tried. And in a way, there are some songs that we work with some bands in the first game, and I like that it's a bit. The style is a bit fluid. It's not very clear what style is this. It's no. You cannot say, oh, it's try to be Celtic music or this or that. It doesn't try to be not.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
you avoid the kind of cliche
yeah,
assumptions incredibly.
yeah. So I prefer just a layer that supports whatever the story. It's all about the story for me. What is the emotion? Trying to connect. And I think in the first game that works very well. When you are in that world with Senua, it feels very alien. Like, okay, this is a bit. This feels different. I'm going through this forest, but it doesn't feel like a normal forest, which is basically what happens with to Eddie or anyone that has psychosis. They are going through their own.
Yeah. I will say I must also applaud you. I'm a big fan of when people take a big swing.
Mm,
It's one of those I don't even have to like it. Like sometimes I'll see a movie and I'll think this doesn't work for me. Actually, I
mhm,
can give you an even better example. Death Stranding is a game that I just can't get into. I
mhm,
could not, but I'm so glad it exists
mhm.
because I love that Kojima and his team had the kind of craziness to make a game this bizarre and could get it done. Like to me, the world is better when artists
Yes.
take aggressive
Yes.
Chances.
Yes.
And I will say, you guys did one of the kind of ballsier
Mm,
swing the end with this like this when these drums started coming in,
mm.
and it's like this thing that has been, like you said, so less is more
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so strained, and then this thing kicks in. I
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah.
wow, that is so bold. I'm on board, even if just solely on the boldness of this choice, because it was such a shift.
Mm.
Um, I'm curious because I never read any from you. Like, what was the sort of like process of this, or if anybody resisted, or if you had to convince, like, how did this even happen?
So to be fair, at that level, the whole thing, the ending of the first Hellblade on the with Hela there, we did it so quick, like so quick. We were, I think, we did it in less than 2 weeks. That thing, the whole thing. So there was no process really. There was just a rush to. But at that point, this is a thing that happens probably in any creative project. When you start, you are a bit lost in the elements. You don't know. When you end, you understand the language of that game, so you can make
Absolutely.
beautiful decisions in no time. So I
Yep.
think that's what happened. I have all this music, I have all these sounds, I have all this knowledge. Let's just, and there was an electronic feel about it in the visual. So I think I just grasped that and said, okay.
And did anybody kind of raise their hand on the team and go, "Are we sure?" Or there just wasn't time? No one
No,
even.
no, there was no time at all. It was a very critical moment for us. Like the game needed to be launched and it needed to do well.
In a way, it's funny because you're absolutely right. By the time you reach the end, you're fluent in the language. So fair enough. But at the same time, part of what made that such a bold choice was that it was like, at minimum, it was in a different dialect.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yes.
I wouldn't say it fully abandons the language, but it just was such a bold
Yeah,
pivot.
yeah,
I love it. Again, like I said, people will win me over when they show real artistic courage
yeah,
to not just do the obvious thing, and
yeah,
that was
yeah. Yeah. In a way, I think that is what our job should be as an artist to reach.
preaching to the choir. But most people don't have the courage to do it because,
Yeah, you need
you
to
know,
risk
you,
it.
yeah, well, and there's money on the line, and there's people's
Of
jobs, and
course.
there's understandable reasons why
Yes.
we back away from the
Yeah.
craziest possible choice,
Yes.
and the most sort of out there. But
Yes.
you definitely did not. So okay, so how do you then? I will say, it was my goal to finish Hellblade 2 before we did this call, and I just kept constantly getting sidetracked that I only played about half of it.
Hmm.
I put in, I don't know, 5 hours or something, whatever is about
Hmm.
half. I remember looking up how long it is and realizing,
Hmm.
oh, I'm about halfway.
Hmm.
So there might be surprises from the end of I'm actually amazingly unspoiled on the game, so there's probably some things that it is an opportunity missed to not be able to ask you about them in this call, sadly. But the whole thing feels like a big
Hmm.
leveling up on all these ideas. It's like, in hindsight, it makes it look like the first one is when you look at the little patch of dirt and there's the little
Yeah.
things coming up, and now we've got something more mature and
Yeah. Yeah.
so walk me through what it's how you then kind of broach, where do we go from here? How do we build it up? Because it very clearly feels that way.
So on the first one, I was alone. I did. So there is I can do so much and also use my brain. On this one, we are seven. It's all combined, thinking about okay, different sensibilities, making all the ideas, as you say, that are coming through the voices. I'm very interested in technology and how we can apply acoustics real time that are more believable, because that makes immersion feel more natural. Like when you're in a
Mm,
space that actually looks and feels as we are taught by reality, we are more tuned with that. And how we can bring music. Like there is a level that is this ritual that they are people singing, and all that is playing through a thing from Microsoft called Triton, which calculate all these acoustics, and it's just fantastic. So the process was to bring this vision to a level of quality and, as you say, maturity that I couldn't do it before. And actually, I really like that we are more, and everyone has their own little heart in this.
mm,
So Daniele brought his own sound design and his own style, and Jamie and Matteo and everyone bring their own personality. We are a team. It should feel like
yeah.
we are working together. It's not just me saying this, like this. No, it's like, okay, this is the feeling that we want, whatever,
Yeah.
right?
I guess it. I guess when you put it that way, that's actually very clear. When I kind of reanalyze it in my head with that in mind, it does seem to. It's richer in a way that would suggest multiple hands had their
Hmm.
opportunities to kind of polish and
Hmm.
tighten all the screws.
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, you engaged. I'm suddenly blanking on their name, but there's this phenomenal band.
Yeah,
Um,
Hylon.
Heilung, yeah,
Yeah,
I was such a fan of theirs. I remember it was like I don't remember how I came across them, but I'm always on YouTube looking up interesting, and I came across these incredible performances they do, and it was like I thought that's such a match made in heaven for
they
for
have some energy going. Like
oh yeah,
it's just pure. I really think if there is the possibility to see them live, is an experience, because they bring this whole bubble of their own universe, and you are there in this ritual life. It's very cool. Also, they are Maria sings absolutely incredible. Like he has a control of the voice that is just, and is raw and is powerful. And they are very good with lyrics, and I learn a lot from them. If you pay attention to, I'm privileged to spend time seeing how other people work,
mm,
and I've been in their studio and see how they compose music, how they approach lyrics, how they approach rhythm, and it's just incredible. And then I think on retrospective, maybe they got involved too early. The game came together too late,
oh
and
really? Why do you think so?
because we did some music at the beginning, but we didn't know really what the game will be.
Mm,
And you have a song that is 4 minutes, but you don't know what is the game gonna be. And ideally, you wanna have it. So what we did at the end is what grab elements and make them flow.
yeah, sure,
And it's just curiosity. What it would have been if we knew better what it was. We
right.
can make them
I mean, every game has this challenge, right? You know, you
exactly,
it's this ultimate chicken and egg where you know
exactly,
you how do you know when you can safely move forward with things?
exactly.
Um, and but it's funny. I mean, obviously, we always feel things along those lines, but it didn't feel in context from what I've played like any aspect of it was sort of had like baked in
Yeah,
ideas that might have aged out of the vision of the game. It all
yeah,
felt
yeah,
very cohesive. I mean, like I said, it was actually more so than the first one. It
yeah,
really
yeah.
felt like it was very confident in its identity because it knew what worked in the first one and said, how do we build
Yes,
from here?
yes.
Also, as a side note, that must be one of the most visually beautiful things I've ever seen in a game, and probably the single best facial animation I've ever seen.
It's
I
in,
mean,
it's insane.
ungodly.
It's insane. Like really.
Yeah,
And actually, from a when you're working with those visuals, right, as a sound or it's just unbelievable. You put the
yeah.
music simple behind that face that is trembling, and just with the lip. It's so subtle.
Oh yeah,
It's just they are magicians, absolute magicians,
truly. No,
truly.
it seems like a really it's so interesting that part of this began with you making clear how much the language of this was new to you and not your thing. It seems by now it must feel very natural.
Yes,
Um,
correct.
so does that mean that the next project for you we need to do some like
I think I don't like to get comfortable.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say like we need to do some jazz trio or something or
Exactly. I don't like to get comfortable because I think it gets boring,
yeah.
right?
Well, yeah.
And you want to have fun. I think that why I do this is because it's really funny in an intellectual way. It's just
Yeah.
okay. Oh,
So what would be what's your bucket list? What would be the thing that you go, I'm scared of it, therefore sign me up.
so you mentioned it. I'm starting to learn about jazz, and
Ah, nice.
I really like it. I Brad Meldau in piano, for example, with those rhythm, those melodies. Uh, I'm trying to learn is really different language from classical to me. It has the same
Oh,
components, right? Same pieces, but it's a different way of thinking. I'm struggling a bit, but it's fine. It's okay. So and then I really want to step up on orchestration and go a bit and choirs. Choirs.
mm.
I really like to work more with voice and mixing styles. Uh, Classical choir with something new, but with voices, experimenting.
Preaching to the choir. Uh, yeah. Well, I hope that Ninja Theory is taking notes right now and saying, okay, the next game is going to be a jazz, saxophone quartet backed up by choir and some
But
like
that's
Bill
interesting.
Evans piano.
That, when you have the expectation that just create this mood, eh, whatever, but then just what happens if you put jazz in a way that can work in a Hellblade universe? I don't know, like just remove the expectation and work to make it work. What I don't know.
You are so preaching to the choir. One time, I got asked way at the start of my career. I met a guy who was working at Activision and said, "Would you be ever interested in working on a Call of Duty game?"
Mhm.
And I said, "I don't think you would want what I would want to do with Call of Duty." And he said, "Well, pitch us." Needless to say, I did not get the job, but my pitch was because this was World at War. This was
Uh-huh.
like 2006 or 7 or whatever that like so this was the last World War II Call of Duty they did for a
Uh-huh.
long time before it was all like modern warfare and stuff for a while. But this was I think the last World War II one uh, of that era. And I said, I have family members that served in World War II. And my grandfather and his cousins and I the thing that always strikes me is thinking about the fact that they were basically 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. So I said, my fantasy for a Call of Duty game would be to take like 1940s big band and
Mm,
put it through the meat grinder
mm,
because they, these are kids, they're storming Normandy Beach or they're in the ice cold Battle of the Bulge and all these, boarding planes to fight off the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain, all these, like, world historic events. But they're also thinking, I wish I was at home.
mhm,
There's that girl I want to ask out and we can go get ice cream. Like they want to be a 19-year-old kid.
mhm.
And I kept thinking, what if we channel what's the world of a 19-year-old kid on the battlefield, And it was my fantasy to take like a big band score and just mangle the shit
Wow,
out of it.
wow, that
They
sounds
were like, no thanks.
wow. Well, I think it sounds absolutely amazing.
I
Really,
mean, of course, obviously the game would have to probably have something to clarify to the player why we're doing that. Like it would have to have some narrative element of
yeah,
dreaming of home or something. I
yeah,
confess that you can't just. It would be a little bit weird to just impose that.
yeah.
But But no, that's why everything you're saying, I'm like, dude, man, I think we think similarly. It's
Yeah.
always why you really proved it with Hellblade. It's like this.
I think you made that point. That is super important. You say, I have this idea for this universe with this music, but I need to, in the story, needs to be reflected. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so we need to be in Ninja and privileged because I'm part of that discussion and I can steer things to make
Oh, that's great.
to make a space for musical ideas. So
Yeah, no, that's great. That really shows.
Yeah,
Especially in the second game, it really shows that makes total sense, I should say. And it kind of, in hindsight, makes a lot of stuff make sense that the team was kind of treating all the elements as one
yes,
creative, flock of birds. Well, my friend, this is awesome. It's truly amazing. So yeah, congrats. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this here today.